All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Senior Tech Coffee. And today we're going to be talking about taking control of your Google account. And lots of new folks here this time. I appreciate everyone joining today. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and just launch right in. And so Senior Tech Coffee is brought to you by Prime of Life Tech, which is my business, and I provide tech support and training for the older adult community, small businesses, and senior care professionals. And I'm going to have some new offerings that I'll be rolling out here that you'll learn more about either through my email newsletter. And if you'd like to sign up for that, there's a form on my website, or you can just let me know in the chat today. Going to be rolling out some new offerings, simplified technology solutions. So for older adults, so think along the lines of like Chromebooks or simplified iPads or the smart displays like the ones from Google and Amazon. And then in addition, home automation for aging in place, basically using smart home technology to automate a lot of routine tasks that which would help anyone, but older adults in particular. So anyhow, well, you can learn more about that here as I roll some stuff out on my website and through my other marketing. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the following things regarding your Google account. So there's a privacy checkup that you can run to basically make sure that everything's secure and tight as far as your what you're sharing with Google and the world. And then we'll talk about the security checkup options that you can go through, activity controls, which has to do with things like your location information and other things like that. How you can download a copy of your Google data if you decide at some point that you no longer want to store things in the cloud, or there's certain information that you want to have a backup copy of that you can store locally or in some other manner. And then also finally, what are the things that you can do with your Google account as part of estate planning? And that's a fairly detailed thing that we'll go into here shortly. So I'm going to bail on the slides for the moment, and then we're going to launch into the Google account stuff. So let's begin by how do you access your Google account? Let's start with that. So I happen to be using the Chrome browser, and by using the Chrome browser, one of the things Google likes you to do is to sign in with your Google account so that basically you can have access to all your stuff without having to sign in every time you launch the browser. So when you're signed in, you'll see the picture, your picture, usually up here, and the little icon where I have the infinity sign. This is my Prime of Life Tech Google account. And over below that, there's these 9 dots that you see on the upper right corner of the browser. So that's what I call very creatively the 9-dot menu. And the 9-dot menu gives you access to all of Google's apps, the most commonly used apps, as well as your data. But the very first thing you see here in the top left of that menu is account. And so that's how we get into our Google account. So let's start with looking at the privacy checkup. So there's a couple different things that I just want you to take note of when we're at this main account screen. First thing over here is the menu on the left side. And you can go into, and we will be going into most of these other areas when we are going to cover the topics for today. The other thing that you'll see are these kind of panels. There are, in this case, are 4 of them. And those are sort of like top level menu items that you can start with right away. Over here on the right hand side, in the second row is the privacy suggestions, and it's telling me that I've got some suggestions that it wants me to review. So 5 of them, in fact. So I'm going to click on that. So first thing with your privacy is what do you want Google to store, even on a temporary basis, as far as what you do when you're interacting with the Chrome browser and your Google account? Well, your web and your app activity is the first one. You can set it up so that you can auto delete your web and app activity. So if you don't want to have that information just hanging out in perpetuity, you can set one of these options here to auto delete your activity after so many months, and they've got some 3 options here: 3, 18, or 36 months. So pretty, from a relatively short to a pretty long stretch of time. And it asks, how long is right for you? It kind of just depends on how much stuff how far back in time you want to go. Personally, I like to keep a lot of my history around for a while, because sometimes I'll read something and maybe I don't bookmark it, or but for whatever reason, I want to access it again in the future. So you can go, I'm going to just open another tab here really quick. You can go to your history and you can look at everything that you've been browsing for however much time. And in this case, I'm looking at the last couple of hours here this morning, and I can go and I can access this thing that I that I was just referring to. So anyhow, but if I want to trim that off after so much time, I can set that here. So that's just one option under the activity controls under privacy. And it's not being very responsive. So let me go back to my account. So the other privacy suggestions include things like, so we've got the web and app activity. And here, the next item is your location history. This is probably something that's more relevant on your phone or on your tablet. I mean, this is on a laptop, and keep in mind though, but this is for the whole account, right? So whatever device I have that account logged in on, whether it's on my phone, whether it's on my computer, that's really immaterial. If you have a location sensing sensor on your device, whether it's your computer, your tablet, or your phone, Google will keep track of that history for you. That's a good and a bad thing. On the one hand, we've got enough surveillance going on in terms of the stuff that we don't know about or the stuff that we can't control. This is one of the things you can control. So, and it's pretty much just a toggle, an on or an off type of thing. So it wants me to explore my timeline. I'm going to say, no thanks for right now. But basically, you can say, look, you can see over here, location history is off in the lower corner over here. And that's, I can turn it back on by using that particular set of controls. So if I click in that and I toggle this on by flipping this switch here, that turns on my location history. And of course, it gives you this warning that says, location history saves when, where you go to your devices. And you can read this on at your leisure if you go in and want to change these settings. But those are just a couple things to consider as far as the activity controls. As far as the other activity controls are concerned, really the main thing is, the other things are, do you want to maintain your history of what you've watched on YouTube? That can be helpful. Do you want to make it so that the ads that Google serves up to you And that's kind of the whole point of Google, because they are an advertising company, is serving up your ads. Do you want those ads to be personalized according to your interests? So, and that is also just a on or off type of thing. But if you scroll down into the advanced or low openness section of that panel there, there's just some more information as far as how your activity and your information is used by Google to personalize ads with other apps and then websites that you might visit. So anyhow, and of course, here's all my interests. May or may not. That's usually based on the news that I read, the things that I click through on if I'm looking at Google News, or unless you go in and you specify your interests, and that's kind of a whole other thing. So, anyhow, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to speak up. So as far as the rest of the privacy checkup is concerned, that is basically it. There are a couple other things though that I want to point out here under the privacy checkup. Sorry? Was there a question? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Let's see. So Google Photo settings, one thing you can do is if you're using the Google Photos app, when you take a photo with your phone or with a tablet, it records the geolocation information as far as where you physically were when you took that photo. So if I'm on the, if I'm on the Amalfi Coast in Italy and I take a picture of the lovely shoreline, all that kind of stuff, it's going to note the fact that I was physically in Italy at this particular location. And you can have that stuff removed from your photos by clicking this little toggle here, basically saying, remove the geolocation information from any items that I share when I use a link. So in other words, it'll still record that information. I think in reality, the geolocation information is probably stored in the photos still. But when you're sharing the photos, I think it removes the geolocation information when you toggle this thing on here. And that's when you actually share the photos from your Google Photos account. Next thing, and by the way, it'll check off all of these things as you go down the list and open each little section. Helping people connect with you. If you want to be able to use the phone number that's associated with this Google account with Google Voice, if you have a Google Voice number, this is basically sharing that information on video calls or messages, that type of thing. Especially when you call someone, it's basically the caller ID stuff. Do I want to switch on my caller ID information? Is effectively what you're asking there. So anyway, and then finally, third-party access. This is something I want to kind of put a little spotlight on. You've probably seen the option with other services online where you have the ability to log in with, say, your Google account, with your Facebook account. It's a service that basically, well, one of the word that's used in the IT world, or the phrase in the IT world, is called single sign-on. So what that allows you to do basically is you don't have to create another username and password for that particular service if you use this single sign-on capability, either with your Google account, your Facebook account, and sometimes other products have that capability as well. So if I go, I don't know if, and this tells me right here, 5 apps have access to your data. Well, what does that mean? Let's go into manage the third-party access. So you can see under this third-party access panel here, that Calendly, which is an app I use for scheduling. Some of you folks already also use that. Facebook appointments, Mac OS, which is, the operating system on the computer I'm talking to you over right now. Square appointments and Zoom, all of those things have access either to my contacts or my Google Calendar for different reasons. And that's access that I've granted these other services to my Google stuff. Okay. And as you can see, we've got a button here that allows me to remove the access for any of these things if I see fit. Why would you do that? Well, let's say, for example, I decide I'm going to delete my Facebook account, and I don't want Facebook to access my calendar anymore. I can remove that access. And the little information button here, it basically tells you what it has access to, and then some other, sort of details about the app and generally, what you've granted the access for. And there's more information here with these little pop-ups with the question mark, which I'll let you read when you check this stuff out for yourself. Anyhow, something just to be aware of when you grant that kind of access is that one thing that's not clear to me is how much information of your personal information that Google is aware of, how much of that gets shared with these other services. In other words, by granting, this says Facebook appointments has access to my Google Calendar. Is that it? Is there more? Is there stuff that's sort of behind the scenes that they're exchanging as far as information about me, like for advertising purposes, that kind of thing? I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. So something to just consider when you grant third-party access. Is it worth the convenience of not creating a separate username and password just to be able to use your Google account or your Facebook account or whatever to sign into some other service? That's something you'll have to think about. Now, one other thing to consider, though, is that, like, for example, with this Calendly, which a lot of folks use for scheduling, you want to have, it needs access to your Google Calendar so that you don't have people scheduling on top of other appointments, right? So there's actually a utility there in allowing Calendly to access my Google Calendar so that I'm not, doing stuff that I shouldn't be doing as far as scheduling is concerned. Those are the kinds of things just to consider. In the case of the Mac OS here, it says it has access to Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Contacts. Well, that's how I can access all of those things, by using the programs on my computer. And there's going to be a similar kind of thing on a Windows computer if you're using, say, for example, Outlook to access email from a Google account or a Google Calendar through the Outlook program itself. So anyhow, I'm gonna, in the interest of time, move on unless there are any questions. So let's go next to the security. We kind of actually did, this is actually kind of part of the security checkup, but I'm gonna go to I think I'm going to a different account for that. So let me find the right tab here. In fact, I'm going to close the ones I don't need. Okay, so here we are. This is the account I want to use. So here we are back at so this is a different Google account, and I'm just using separate accounts for demonstration purposes, because for all the different topics that we're talking about, my different accounts are some of my accounts are in a slightly different state, as it were. So anyhow, and I'll take a look at questions in the chat here in just a second. So let's look at the security. Oh, actually, let me just take a look right now, since we're here and we're between topics. Will you provide access to this recording? Yes. I will post a link to the recording in the meetup group, which you all accessed this talk through meetup. So for today's talk, I'll post a link to that, and as well as a link for the steps on the estate planning part. So thanks for that question. Let's go next into the security checkup. So security checkup, again, we're back here at the home screen on my Google account, and this panel on the top right tells me you have security issues. Let's go check it out. So one of the things that Google wants you to do as part of securing your account is to provide two pieces of information: a phone number, preferably on a smartphone, because it wants to be able to send you text messages, and then a recovery email. The recovery email being a different email address than the one for your account that you're working with. Excuse me a sec. So in this particular case, what's the advantage of doing this? What is the disadvantage of doing this? The disadvantage of doing it is that you're giving, in the case of a phone number, one more piece of information that Google has about you, good, bad, or indifferent. You're volunteering that information. But is the trade-off worth it? The trade-off being that if I get locked out of this particular account, if I go to sign into this account, I blow the password 3 times, it's going to lock the account, right? So if I enter the incorrect password 3 times, it's just going to lock the account. It's not going to give me the option to sign in again. How do I recover access to that account? Through one of these methods, either the phone number or the recovery email. And by going with a phone number, it can send you a temporary password that you can use to regain access to your account. The other thing that you can do with the phone number is there's a authentication method. Authentication meaning, like username and password, gaining access to the account. There's a method called two-factor authentication. And you've probably used it, even if you aren't familiar with that word. That's the deal where if you go to sign into, oftentimes a bank will use it, for example. You go to sign into a bank account, or in my case, if I transfer a certain amount of money between accounts that's over a certain value, it wants me to, my bank sends me a code, but as a text message. Usually it's like a 6-digit numeric code. Sends me this code via a text message. It wants me to plug that in before it'll allow me to continue with that transfer. Certain services, Facebook even, can utilize two-factor authentication. What's the advantage of using it? Two-factor authentication is one more piece of information that you can provide to prove that you are you. So let's say, for example, I'm going to try to hack Ralph's Google account, right? I've got his username. I either acquired his password through like a phishing email or through some other type of social engineering. And I've got the two usually key and only pieces of information you need to access an account of some kind. So if that's all I need to get into Ralph's Google account, I'm golden. I can log into Ralph's Google account. I can do whatever I want with it. I can steal his identity. I can do all kinds of nefarious things. But if Ralph uses two-factor authentication on his Google account, where a code has to be either generated by a two-factor authentication app, which is actually the preferred method, or the less secure but still valid method and most commonly used method is getting a text message with that numeric code. So if Ralph's using one of those two methods and I go to sign into his account and it tells me, enter the code, from your text message or whatever, and I don't have the code, well, I can't access Ralph's account. And by the way, if I fail at entering that, Ralph should get a notification in some form, whether it's through an app or through an email that says, hey, Ralph, did you just try to sign into your account from such and such a device? And Google being the one that will send that message. And Ralph will know that, oh, geez, someone just tried to access my account. Maybe I need to change my password just to make sure that everything's, copacetic. So anyhow, so the sign-in and recovery methods, a phone number and a recovery email, those are basically ways that you have to recover your account in the event of a lost password. Usually that's what you need them for more than anything. The other thing, and these are just some more FYI types of things, in this case on the security checkup, it shows you the devices that you have signed in on this particular account. If I go over to this other account that I have and look at the security issues, you can see I have 5 devices signed in using this particular Google account on all these different devices, and are all these legitimate? Yeah, I think they are. What's this other Apple iPad? I'm not really sure. Maybe I need to go and check that out. Do I not recognize this device? Oh, maybe we should sign out of that device just in case. So that's, just one of the things that you can go in and double check. How many devices do you have signed in using this particular Google account? If I had, if this other iPad was my old iPad, and it is, but let's say it's an iPad that I donated. Well, gee, that's probably not okay if that particular device is no longer in my control, but my Google account is still signed in on that device. What does that mean if that's signed in on that other device? Usually it's going to mean that anything that's associated with this particular Google account, I can access through that device. That could be Gmail, that could be contacts, docs through the Docs app, things of that nature. So if it's a device that's no longer in your possession, you definitely want to log it out. And you can do that from this 3-dot menu here. And you can just go right to sign out and sign it out. So let's see. The other thing that it'll show you, recent security activity. What that means is that's where you granted access using to a certain device in a certain location on a certain date. So in this particular case, February 18th, macOS was given account access while we were, in the state of Colorado. If that said Singapore, that could be a problem, right? Because I don't live in Singapore. And so if you see unfamiliar activity, one of the things it's going to say, well, gee, maybe you should probably change your password, do something so that you secure your account. Like we saw before, these are apps rather that have access to my data, and it tells you what data. The Mi Fit thing, that's my smartwatch. So it has access to certain parts of my Google data. It's not really telling me what it has access to here. So if you're concerned about that, I know it's probably just the fitness stuff related to my Google account. You actually have fitness stuff related to your Google account if you want it. We'll talk about that another time. Anyhow, and then if I saved any passwords, I don't in my user behavior, I don't usually save passwords in the browser in Chrome. I have a password manager app that I use. And so that's where I go to for my passwords. So, if you are saving passwords with your Google account, the only advantage to that, or I shouldn't say the only advantage, the key advantage to that is that if you're logged in with that same Google account on other devices, you can access those saved passwords when you're using Chrome on those other devices. So that's the advantage of doing that, or even having a password manager generally. So, all right. So I believe that's everything with the security checkup that I wanted to discuss. Let's see, activity controls. Let me go back to my Google account. And let's see, activity controls. Yeah. So over here on the left side, well, let me just actually take us through this menu really quick. So the personal information, by the way, this is your basic information as far as what you enter and what you may or may not be sharing with the world. But if you go to this about me part that we just went in, you'll notice there's this sort of key, this legend at the top. The padlock means that only you can see that information. The icons with the people indicate that anyone can see that information. So what can other people see as far as all my stuff? Well, they can see my name, they can see this picture of me, they can see that, but they can't see that I'm male or that this is my birthday. Um, and I can add other contact information, other about type information, work and education, that kind of thing. And I can decide whether or not I want anyone besides myself to see that information, kind of like your LinkedIn profile or your Facebook profile. So you can choose what people see and what they can't see. If I want to revoke that permission and I only want people to, I think I just have to remove it actually. Maybe that's a bad example. And there's certain things that it may not let me change. Let me try this one. Okay, here we go. So I can say only I can see it. This is what I was looking for. Only I can see it or anyone can see it. So, so I can change that if I want, as far as what people can see. Let's see, the other activity, so back down, let's go back to this next thing. So back to activity controls, which is what I was going to talk about. And we've kind of already hit this from another angle, so I'm going to go through this really quick. This is basically the web and app activity, location history, YouTube history. Am I preserving that and for how long? That's really the settings there. So like we saw before, I can go in and I can choose an auto delete. And well, first off, I can toggle on or off. Do I even want to save it? Do I want to save it ever? Right? Do I want to include these other things like my Chrome history and activity from sites and apps and devices? Do I want to include auto recordings that I've accessed? Do I want to use that auto delete stuff? And do I want to review and delete my past activity? So, and this is all the stuff that I've accessed recently on, various things, various devices. So not just this computer, but all my devices that use this account. So anyhow, so you can go through and toggle the saving or not, toggle the auto delete or not, and you can pick and choose the things that you just want to remove. Let's see, get back to I'm not getting back to where I want to be. Let me go. Actually, yeah, my menu's different on this account. There we go. Okay. Let's see. I think that's all I wanted to talk about with activity controls. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go to downloading your data. So back here under data and personalization on the menu on the left here, if I scroll down, um, there's a couple different things I want to bring to your attention. You can see here this sort of like dashboard type of indicator that tells you that I've used almost 3.5 gigabytes of my 15 free gigabytes with Google. That's one of the advantages of using a Google account is the free cloud storage that you get when, and when I say free cloud storage, what does that all encompass? It encompasses mainly the stuff that you keep in Google Drive, um, the attachments that are attached to your emails in Gmail. And then if you're using Google Photos, if you're using Google Photos and you're storing the photos in their full size, that's going to count against your free 15 gigabytes. Google Photos, um, Google Photos has been a free service, a free service that allowed you to store an unlimited number of photos in the cloud that does not count against your free 15 gigabytes of storage. However, the way that they made it free was they basically compressed the photo quality down from whatever the original size was to, I want to say, 12 megapixels, which isn't shabby. I mean, it's not. Fred, what's your highest megapixel camera that you have? Fred's a photographer.
Currently, it's 42.
Yeah. So, so what's that? Almost 4 times as much
Yeah, it's
in
a
terms of
bunch.
in terms of resolution. But for looking at for looking at digital photos on a phone, on a tablet, on most computer monitors, or even on a digital photo frame, 12 megapixels is actually pretty good. Um, it's not going to take up as much space on any of those devices if they've been reduced. But they stay the original size on your device, on your phone. In this case, I can't remember off the top of my head. And Fred, you might remember what is the generally now the standard megapixel resolution on smartphones. I just don't remember off the top of my head.
They generally were between 12 to 16. My new Samsung, well, not the newest one anymore, was has a setting up to 108 megapixels.
Wow. So
So
that's really high resolution, right? I mean, you can actually have prints made from something that high a resolution. Maybe not poster size, but or maybe I don't know. I'm not. That's your wheelhouse. But
yeah,
anyhow, but the point being is that starting June 1st, um, Google will no longer have a free unlimited photo storage for Google Photos. And so if you have anything that's stored in your Google Photos that's at the 12 megapixel size where it's reduced it down, anything that's stored in your Google account up until June 1st, I believe will not count against your 15 gigs of free storage after June 1st, but anything that you upload after June 1st will count. So you could sort of bank some things in there if you really wanted to have a bunch of your stuff in the cloud at that reduced resolution. Um, and I think that the alternative is to have up to 100 gigabytes of storage on Google, which is for everything, photos and everything, I want to say they're going to charge $2 a month for that, for 100 gigabytes. So you'll have to weigh whether that's worth it to you. Anyhow, so downloading your Google data. And Google, by the way, you can see in the upper left-hand corner, Google One is the name of their storage service that they're calling it now. It's sort of like the commercial version of Google Drive, basically. And you're not limited to 100 gigabytes. It just depends on what you're willing to pay for. I'm going to go backwards here to my Google account, and I'm going to go down to download your data. So this is what they call Google Takeout. And this is going to be a list of like every scrap of data that you have in the Google universe. So Android device configuration service, right? I have an Android phone. I use this Google account on that phone. And so there's stuff related to my phone that is, stored here that I can download. Let's see, the calendar, of course, any Chrome information that I've stored, like my browsing history, bookmarks, those types of things. My contacts. Any, Google Drive is going to be the big one. That's where, anything. So this is something that I actually just recently learned. If you're using the Google productivity products like Google Docs or Google Sheets, Docs being like the equivalent of Microsoft Word, Sheets being like the equivalent of Excel, Google Slides, that's the slideshow that I use. That's Google's equivalent of PowerPoint. Any of the files that you create using Google's productivity apps, they do not count against your 15 gigabytes of free storage. I didn't know that until recently. What does count against your free 15 gigabytes of storage are going to be full-size pictures, but also like say you have actual Word documents or Excel files, or you have zip files containing whatever kind of information that you've zipped up into one of those archives. Those do count against your free storage. Let's see. Anyway, as you can see, every single shred of information, Google Photos, if I had any books, music, the apps that I've installed on my phone, those types of things, I can download basically backup copies of this information and store it off locally if I want to access it and delete this account, for example. Most of this stuff, though, would require, unless it's in a format that's readable by some other application, like, for example, contacts, the vCard format. That's kind of a universal format for contacts. The Apple Contacts app, for example, can read vCards. There's a Windows equivalent that can do the same thing. But there might be certain things that you can only access using a Google program or app. iCalendar, that's also a relatively universal format as well. That can be opened and read successfully by native Mac or Windows apps, those types of things. So anyhow, you can pick and choose the things you want to download. Everything with this check mark next to it, in the box that turns blue when you check it, everything that's checked is going to be downloaded. And when you get all the way to the bottom here, you can go to the next step. And you can decide how do I want to get this? Do I want to do a single export, just one time everything? Do I want to do an export every 2 months for a year, which would be 6 exports? How do I want to do that? What kind of file do I want, those are just different types of archive or zip formats there. And then what's the threshold as far as file size where it's going to split it up into multiple files? Is it 2 gigabytes or is it something larger or smaller? You get to decide that. Then you create the export and it'll give you a link where you can go to download that information. Anyway, that's kind of the rough walkthrough on Google Takeout. So the next thing I want to talk about is the estate planning piece. And for that, I'm going to use a different account. So let's see here. So first off, this next part that we're going to talk about, I recently had the privilege of publishing an article about this specific topic in a local publication, a newspaper for seniors called Primetime News for Seniors, and it's also available online. And I'll share the link to that so that you can walk through this on your own afterwards, after this talk. But anyhow, so when part of your estate planning includes specifying, well, there's one of two people, and it depends on what your which document you're working with. With your will, you designate an executor. If you have powers of attorney, for in the event that you become disabled and you're unable to manage your own affairs, the legal term there is called the principal. So whether you're specifying the executor or the principal, you can use the email address for that person or those people as part of how you want your Google account managed in the event that so much a period of inactivity occurs, usually because you're either disabled or God forbid that you've passed. So so the first thing that we want to do is we're here at the home screen for the Google account. We're going to go down to data and personalization. Now, if and of course, anytime that you're not already logged in, it's going to ask you to log in. We're going to scroll down here, down to this section here where we just were a moment ago for downloading your data. We're going to make a plan for your account, that middle option there. Okay, so basically this, you're telling Google by going through this process, how do you want Google to handle your data when you either aren't or can't use your Google account anymore? How do you want to deal with it? And these are the basic steps here. You decide, when should Google consider your account inactive? Who gets notified? And then should your account be deleted when you get through this process? So so the first thing that I can do is, how much time do I want to elapse before I consider my account inactive? If it was me, I guess it would, if I knew something about the state of my health that gave me cause to choose anything less than 18 months, then I would probably choose the appropriate selection. But in my case, I'm going to say, I think 18 months is good. So, and then, of course, it tells you here, before we take any action, we'll contact you multiple times by email and SMS, being text messaging, to say, hey, is your account still active? Now, what is considered an inactive account? Basically, that means that you have not used any aspect of this particular Google account in any way for however long you specified time-wise. So if I have an access to Gmail, if I haven't used Google Maps, if I haven't created a doc in Google Docs, if I haven't if my phone hasn't been syncing my photos with Google Photos for this whatever period of time I specified, that's considered inactive. But as you can see, there's lots of possible ways for you to still remain active with your account. So let's just take a hypothetical. If I were to be disabled, I'm in the hospital, I'm in a coma, but my wife's still using my phone for whatever. She's still contacting my clients. She's following up, with whoever using my phone that has this particular Google account logged into it. Well, that particular account is still active as far as Google is concerned. So that's just something to consider. Anyhow, if you haven't added a phone number for your Google account, it's going to ask you to add one of those so that you have the option to get text messages from Google to be basically one more avenue for you to recover your account, as we talked about before, but also to participate in this inactive account sort of pulse monitoring, as it were. If you respond to the text message, your account's still active. Is there another contact email that you want to consider? And also, by the way, notice that the phone number is required. So I'm going to have to add my phone number. So it just happens to remember my phone number. So I'm going to say next. And of course, now it wants me to provide the code that it's about to send me. So I'm going to get my code here in just a second. And so here is my code. This doesn't mean you can access my account if you're writing this down. I'm kidding. Verify, and we're good to go. Okay. So that's the contact email that I want to use, which is the email for this particular Google account. I'm going to say next. Now I get to choose who do I want to notify, and I can add a person. I'm just going to add one of my other Gmail addresses. Okay. What do I want to share with this person? So here allows me to specify out of all of my Google stuff. And as you can see, this is a big list of things. What do I want to share with this person? Probably I want to share Google Drive at a minimum. I probably want to share my email. Do I want to share anything beyond that? That's for you to decide. Have you ever used Google My Business with this account? Have I ever used Google Help Communities with this account? Do I care if I share that particular piece of information? So those are the kinds of things that you have to choose. I'm going to say next. And now, who is the person that I want to notify? You have to enter this person's phone number. Now, I'm actually not going to do this particular step, but that's the piece of information that you have to give them to get to that place where they're going to actually receive notification about your account. Now, again, keep in mind, this is after that, however long a period of time you specified has elapsed. The last thing is that you can specify an auto reply. Anyone that emails this Google account after it's been inactivated, you could actually, I know it sounds a little weird, but you can email, it'll be like getting an email from the dead, basically saying, hi, this email, for whatever reason you contacted me, but you're not going to hear back from me other than this automated message. So anyhow.
So basically, you and the email account have expired.
Exactly. But you're letting someone know that, in whatever, however humorous or not, however factual based you want, you're basically letting that person know that something happened and I can't respond to you personally. And then the last final step here is, do I want to delete my inactive Google account? And notice the fine print here says this will happen 3 months after your account becomes inactive. Okay. So there's a separate manual way, you can delete your Google account. But this will do it automatically 3 months after your inactive date. So if you think that is pushing it in terms of the amount of time you want to allow your your survivors or the person that you've granted power of attorney, if that's too short of a window for them to manage your affairs regarding this Google account, then you should probably not enable that particular option. And then finally, we review the plan, and it basically gives you the check marks, and you can confirm the plan or not. So you actually have to hit that final step there to say, yep, this is good, I want to do this. And you can always go back. I mean, I can confirm the plan, but I can also go back and I can change the window, I can remove the phone number, and that essentially disables this whole process. Not to mention the fact that if I haven't checked the box for deleting the account, then that's pretty much it. Anyhow, that we're pretty much at the top of the hour. I did not have anything else that I was going to share. Let me just run back through this guy though. I guess, do you have any questions? And just a reminder that I've got some upcoming dates for the next Tech Coffee. I'm still finalizing either speakers or topics, but those are my next upcoming dates. March 17th in 2 weeks, and then the first Wednesday in April. And there'll be details either through Meetup or through my website. And then finally, here's my contact information if you'd like to reach me. And if you have any issues, if you want some help sort of getting all this Google account stuff sorted out, I'd be happy to work with you on this or any other technical issues that you might have. So anyhow, I really appreciate everyone attending today. And if there are no other questions, I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, I think I got a couple in the chat here. What do we got? Let's see. If you download every 2 months, does Google only export or download the files that are new since the last download? I'm pretty sure that is how that works. It's like an incremental type of thing. If it's, I don't think it's going to give you, like if here's the beginning of time and then 2 months later, I download, is it going to be everything between now and the beginning of time again? I don't think so. It'll just only be the last 2 months. Let's see. And yeah, that's everything question wise in the chat. And if there's nothing else, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today and learn something about your Google account. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, everyone.